Hello everybody, welcome back and welcome to this section. In the next few lectures we're going to go over rendering our models in MatrixGold. Now MatrixGold uses the Cycles render engine which is native to Rhino, and that's come across from Blender. So the 3D software, 3D program Blender developed the Cycles render engine, and now that is that's been adopted from Rhino 6 and it's been implemented within Rhino. So MatrixGold, or I should say Matrix, used to use a V-Ray render engine, but with when MatrixGold came out, they dropped the V-Ray render engine and they used the Cycles render engine, which is inherent to Rhino 6. So there's probably a couple of reasons of doing this, and one is that the render engine Cycles was a huge leap forward from what Rhino had before, which is quite a basic render engine. Now Cycles unfortunately isn't as good as V-Ray, so in my opinion it's probably a little bit of a step backwards. One of the biggest things is for transparent objects, for example glass and diamonds. There's no option to have diffraction and dispersion of colors within the transparent metal. So I should say we do have refraction, so we can change the refractive index of items, but it's the dispersion of color that you normally see with a diamond. You get those flashes of color. Unfortunately, we don't have that in Cycles, or at least not yet. Hopefully, as Cycles gets developed, more and more features will come aboard, and we'll start to see that refraction coming into play a little bit more, that dispersion. So, but saying that, we can still get some really nice renders with the Cycles render engine, and in the next few lectures we're going to be doing that within Matrix. Now when you fire up MatrixGold, it's going to look something like this, but with one key difference, and that is this command or this menu bar up here. MatrixGold tends to hide some things that they don't want you fiddling with, but we can absolutely get this menu bar back up for when we want to go deeper into some of the settings here. And to do that we need to go to the Rhino options. Of course MatrixGold has these little preferences that come up here, and again that's just sort of a skin which sort of removes some of the things that they don't want you fiddling with. But we can go back, and if we type options, which is a Rhino command, then we'll get the Rhino options here. And for example, I've just been fiddling with the appearance and I've been changing my colors. You can do things like changing the background color, something like that if you find the black a little bit too dark. But I'll just set it to a fairly dark gray there. Now what we want to have this menu bar appear is we need to go into the it is appearance, and you can see we've got a checkbox there for the menu bar. If I uncheck that, you can see it's disappeared. I'm just going to re-enable that, so that's back there. And that's how you get the menu bar up. And that will allow us to go into our panels and pick up things like materials. And that's just popped up on the other screen, sorry. And that's going to show us some of the materials that we're using when we render. So let's get started, and we're going to bring in our render model. And let me just grab the Ring Solitaire 4-Claw Render Ground Plane, and that's the one with the ground plane in it. And I'm going to open that file. And I'm going to say no, I don't want to save the changes. I could have gone Matrix open and gone to that file, but since I had it already in a browser there, that was just an easy way for me to grab that. Okay, so this is what we've got, and I'm going to change this to shaded, and these few here to ghosted, ghosted, and ghosted. So we've got our model, and if we go to the panels and come to named views, then we can see we've got our named views that we set up in the last section as well. So we've got our front view, we've got our perspective, we've got our other perspective, side view, and top view. And if you just want to go back to the perspective view, you can hit that little down arrow there, go back to set view, and we can go to perspective. And that's the default perspective view. So if we want to render, we need to come to the render studio. And if I collapse that there, then to get to that, it's coming up to render, render studio, and there it is. And off the bat, we've got a big button up here that says render. See what happens there. And it says it's rendering. And it's just popped up on this screen here. Okay. And that doesn't look too good. So we can press stop and get rid of that. And for now, I'm going to go to our perspective 1 view. And I'll make this a bit larger for us. So of course that's the render button there. We've also got the render button here. We can press that and the same window is going to pop up and do the same sort of thing. Now it hasn't done the same thing because perspective 1 is not the active viewport. I need to click on perspective 1 to make sure that's active. It's a little bit hard to see here with the colors. And you can see we're rendering that perspective 1 view. Now we've also got some options here for the resolution, and you can either have a custom resolution where you can enter in your own dimensions. And if you're going to be presenting images for a client, it's usually not, if this is a customer that's coming in and wants to purchase something, it's usually not too beneficial to have a really big image to present them. The danger of that is they can just zoom right in and they can say things like, I want, this very, very minor thing here changed. And we know that that can always be a bit of a headache when they're looking at something which doesn't even matter in the end result. But customers are like that. They're going to pick up on things if you make the image so large like that. So in my experience, I find it preferable to give them a slightly smaller image, which is going to give them a more realistic view of the ring. Because remember, the ring itself is only going to be maybe 20 millimeters by 15-20 millimeters big. So if you make the render image too big, it can sort of confuse and mislead customers. So keep it a little bit smaller, and hopefully you can avoid some of those issues there. When it comes to some of our high-end rendering, then absolutely you can make this as big as you want and go in as close as you want, because it's not bespoke for somebody. If you're using this for advertising or presenting on social media or printing off or anything like that, then you're not doing it to a customer specification, so it doesn't matter what they say about it, because that's not its purpose. So for this one here, we're going to do it as if we are presenting this to a customer, and 640 by 480, that's pretty good. We'll press render and we'll see what that render size looks like. And that's going to be perfect for a customer to view on their phone or through email or something like that. Okay, I'll nix that. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I am going to make this bigger because I want to be able to see all the nitty-gritty and really sort of analyze these images as we go along. If we can get a really nice rendering with a bigger resolution, a higher resolution, then when we take that down to a smaller resolution, it's still going to look amazing. So I'm going to go for 1024 by 768. The passes here, this is an indication of the render quality. And if I press render, then we're going to see down the bottom here, path tracing sample, and it's counting up to 150 passes. And what happens when you render is little photons or virtual photons get sent through the scene, bounces off objects, and that's how it calculates what the lighting should be for a particular scene with particular objects. So the more samples or the more passes we get, the higher the quality we will have. Now, this might not be evident, but this image here is a little bit grainy, and you'll see that little bit of grain in the back here. And the more number of passes you have, the longer it's going to take to render. So if I change this to 40 and render, it's going to take a lot less time, but we're going to have a very, very reduced quality of render as well. So that's 40 samples there, and you can probably start to see that grain or that noise coming in quite extreme there. So you can also come up to something like 400, and you'll get a much smoother, less noisier render. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to you and what you're willing to, how much time you're willing to have this thing run in order to get your renders. And remember that a smaller resolution, a smaller image size is going to take a quicker amount of time as well. Now we can start to apply some materials to the design. And I'm going to just select everything there. And if you want to change the layer that these things are on, you can. I'm just going to put these on different gem layers. And that's the gem there. And I'm now going to make sure that perspective 1 is active. And I'm going to press render. And by having the different metals on different layers, it's going to automatically apply some of the materials to those layers. So it works on a per layer basis. And you can see you've got a bit of a yellow gold happening here on the ring, and the diamond's just looking pretty blah. So I think that the layers that we have here are going to have the different metals applied. And to find out exactly what metals are applied to what layers, I can come to the panels, and I want to come to the layers panel, which is the second one down there. And we get something like this pop out. And if I just drag this out and drag this down, then you can see that the layers that we've got here, gems has a, sorry, these are the ones that I imported, gems and ground. And we've got a material already applied to those. For the metal layer, the first one, the dark green, has a yellow gold applied to it. Then the third one has a diamond, and the fourth one has an opal. So these are all sort of inherent within MatrixGold, and they might not be what you want to, what materials you want applied to that object. So in order to change that, I am just going to, I should say, not in order to change what material has been applied to the layer, but rather what material will we apply to the object. Well, I can come to the Render Studio, and under Materials, we can make some changes there. So with the shank selected, the shank in the setting, I want this to be a sort of like a platinum style of metal, just a nice white metal. So you can come to metals here, and I'm just going to choose the palladium white, super 14 karat. There's a few different options here, but to be honest, I mean, who uses green gold and you know, well, I think there's too many options here. We really just need like just a platinum or something like that, and we can use that for white gold. You know, white gold tends to be rhodium plated. Platinum, you know, it all looks the same. So I'm going to take this platinum ruthenium blend and add that to the object. And if we come to the render materials, we will see that platinum ruthenium has been applied there, and this is the color of it. And you can see that we've got, it's just a gray, values of 192, 192. So it's not quite white, it's just a little bit grayer, it's a little bit off-white. And that's fine, that's all we want. The shine refers to how reflective the metal is. And it's sort of like by changing this finish here to like a satin finish, then it's actually going to apply a bump map, which we don't particularly want. If we're just going to do a satin finish, we can actually just change the shine there and just take that down to say 0.8 or something like that. So with that selected there, I'm going to press render and we'll see what happens. And of course, I need to make sure that perspective 1 is the active window and press render. So this is our metal here, and you can see that the metal is a little bit sort of satiny, I guess you'd call it. And that's perfect, that's what we want, because remember I changed that value to 0.8. If I change that back to 1 and press render, then we've got a nice shiny metal on the shank. Okay, cool, we're getting there. So the next thing I'm going to do is take the gem, and I'm going to go from our render materials back to materials. If we're going to be using the platinum ruthenium quite a lot, I'm going to right click and just toggle that as a favorite. And now if I show only favorite metals, then the most commonly materials that you use will be in this library here. So that's a really nice way of sort of filtering out things like green gold, which you're never going to use. So we can always come back to those materials. But for now, I'm just going to make that a favorite material. And I'll come and I'll add some yellow golds and rose golds as well. We are also going to want to apply a diamond to the center gem there. So we can come to gems. And again, there's a whole bunch here to scroll through, and you can have a really good play with just adding different gems to this. But the one we want is diamond. So I'm going to click on the diamond, and with our geometry selected, add material to object. I'm going to right click on diamond and make that a favorite, and then show only the favorites. All right, perspective 1, let's see how this looks. Okay, so that's our diamond. It's starting to take shape. It's not a great render, if I'm totally honest. But we can do better. We can definitely do better. I'm going to select this ground plane here, and I'm going to add a ground plane. And I just want a plain white ground plane, nothing too fancy. There's a whole bunch in here, and some of them pretty ghastly. So I'm just going to add this, and we'll see what this one looks like. And to be honest, nothing has really happened, although I can see something strange going on in the reflection. I think that's the brown bark somewhere is getting shown up there. But we don't want brown bark. We want a... I'll tell you what, I'm going to favor a blurry reflective white. And I'm going to favorite a glossy white, and I'm going to favorite, come all the way down to a white matte. And the white matte I am going to apply to the object and press render. And you can see that we've got this shiny ground plane still. So I'm not sure quite why that is. It could be because I haven't applied that, but also I think I might want to put this on a different layer, maybe a render layer, and see if there's something conflicting there. So I'll press render again, and we'll see if that gives us a better result. Okay, and there you go. We can see we've got the white background. So learning experience for me too. Make sure you swap the layers around. You know, put these, when you import these in, pop those on the correct layers. Okay, and I'm going to close that. So now I've got some materials applied. I'm going to have a look at different styles. First, let's scroll up here, toggle that as favorites. Okay. So we've got the materials, we've got the current render materials in the screen, in the scene. You can see we've got our brown bark there, which I tried to apply as a ground plane. Let's apply that to the object, and we'll see if that works now. Okay, that's still not working for some reason. I'm not sure why, but that's okay. I wouldn't have used that anyway. I'm going to right click on brown bark, and I'm going to delete that. And for some reason we've got opals and pearls coming up as well. And if you remember when we had a look at our layers, then we've got some materials already applied to some of the different layers. So for some reason we've got an opal applied to this layer here, which is the metal 04. So let's have a look now, and we'll have a look at the different render styles. So at the moment we've got the studio diamond active, and I'm going to select a different one, and I'll come all the way up to the top and select arcade, and I'm going to press go. And so that's applied a general style to perspective to our scene. So I'll press render and we'll see what this looks like. And that looks pretty awful. It's, you know, it might be for some people, but it's certainly not for me. So I'm going to close that, and I'm going to guess that there's a whole bunch of styles here that you'll never really touch. For example, boathouse. You know, it's nice to have the options, but for me, just a nice, clean, classic render, that's what we're after. So this one, we've got more of a sort of an oldie worldy sepia style thing here, and you can see we've got a bit more life coming into our diamond. So I'm going to quit that, and we will come down and let's see what whetstone looks like. So we will press that button there to apply that, and we'll render it. And we've got if we look at our reflections, it looks like we've got a bit of an outdoor scene going on there. And I'm going to come back to we'll see what Studio Colorful Diamond looks like actually. Let's press render. And you can see that we've got some flecks of color. Now I know I said earlier that Cycle's render engine doesn't have dispersion of color. So for some reason we've got color in here, and what's happening is they've actually cheated a little bit, and we've got a reflection for this whole scene, and that's what you're seeing being reflected in the shank here. But for the gem there's a different reflection, and it's a reflection with color in it. So although we don't have true dispersion, what's happening is the gem is reflecting an environment with a bit of color in it, and that's what you're seeing here. So I hope that makes sense, and I'll show you a little bit further along exactly how they're doing that. So let's quit that, and I'm going to come back to the Studio Diamond, and I think this is probably our best bet here. So let's render it. And this is our result here. So it's not a bad render. I mean, we've got a little bit of life going on in the diamond. These shoulders, I think there needs a bit more contrast here. I want to see some white reflections popping a little bit more. But as a starting point, I think this is fine. So I'm going to save this now, and we will be able to come back and refer to this image and just sort of see where our journey takes us in regards to comparing it against this first image here. So I'm just going to press save and come into my training file, and for now I'm just going to call this Folklore Solitaire, and I'll call this MatrixGold 1. So now I've got something we can come back to and compare. Okay, now the next couple of lectures we're going to go in a bit more depth behind the scenes and learn how to create our own materials, and also how to control the reflections that we can see within the environment, within the scene that gets reflected with all the metals and the gems. So I'll see you in the next one.